Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Hot Tag here on goit.net. Thanks for joining us on Sunday, March 3rd. I'm Adam Stephen Kelly and I'm joined as always by...
Ed Kenny. Welcome to the show.
Got a lot to get through on this week's edition of The Hot Tag. Lots of news and notes as we continue down the road to WrestleMania 29. Also, the return of the extended mailbag. We're going to be taking a look at, I believe it's 5 or 6 questions this week instead of the usual 3. So, yes, lots and lots to get through. And I think we're going to start off with some news and some highlights in terms of WWE, at least, with some of the notable moments from this past week's Raw and information leading up to next week's Raw, which is a bit of a special show.
Yes, most definitely. Next week's Raw is going to be a very exciting edition. It's actually going to be an old school Raw, and hopefully we'll have the return of The Undertaker. The Undertaker, of course, teamed up with Sheamus this week as a very special appearance against a team of Wade Barrett and Damien Sandow at the house show. So that should be a very exciting edition, Adam.
Yes, indeed, and many were expecting The Undertaker to appear at the this past Monday's Raw, but that wasn't the case. But they did, however, mention, after putting it on WWE.com and putting footage of The Undertaker's entrance when he returned at a house show, they actually put that on Raw, which was quite surprising, because I thought, they'd maybe not even, okay, I mentioned on WWE.com, that's okay, but I was very surprised that they put the footage up there on actual Raw, because it basically meant that no one was, you weren't going to see The Undertaker on that edition, and a lot of people were probably tuned out then, because they were probably expecting The Undertaker to maybe return in the main event, which was, of course, the CM Punk versus John Cena, but that was kind of inevitable that it wasn't going to happen once that video had aired. And even if he does return next week, I still think it's quite strange that they did show that video. I'd have kept it much more low-key, personally.
Obviously, this is a big plus for the wrestling fans. However, with only just over a month to go to WrestleMania, have they given themselves enough time to build up his return? But we'll have to see in the next few weeks what happens, and if he does return next week on Raw. But old school Raws, obviously good. They did a very good job of the last one with the old retro style. So looking forward to this one. Also now on Raw this week, 100% confirmed is this year's WrestleMania main event. The Rock will defend his WWE title against John Cena. This was, of course, after a great match between Cena and Punk to determine the number one contender. So, Adam, now it's actually, the hype is now over. This has been confirmed. Hopefully, if it's anything like last year's contest, this should be another great match.
Yeah, hopefully they can top what they put on last year and finally confirm then that it is going to be Rock Cena 2 and not Rock Punk Cena, which many people had speculated on. But I definitely think it's the right decision there. That's the true money match for WrestleMania. But Cena and Punk did have a very, very good match on Raw, a great Raw main event. I think many people perhaps jumping the gun by saying it was, Cena's best ever WWE match. I don't think it's even the best Cena versus Punk match. I think their match at Money in the Bank 2011 for the WWE title was probably the best match of the decade, to be perfectly honest, in WWE. But definitely a great match nonetheless, and we saw the return of the pile driver when CM Punk gave Cena a sit-out pile driver out of nowhere, and that certainly shocked a lot of people, and reportedly shocked Vince McMahon, who was apparently irate at the fact that a pile driver was involved in that match. But nevertheless, that's the main match of WrestleMania there, all confirmed, with 6 weeks to go now until the showcase of the Immortals.
Going back to what you said about the pole driver, and as you rightly said, Vince McMahon was irate apparently out the back once CM Punk did the move on Cena. However, I find that nowadays, when the risks that wrestlers take in the ring anyway, with jumping off ladders and spearing from the top of the ladders and tables and chair shots, I find that pole driver, providing it's done properly and have someone doing it that knows what they're doing, and more time is taken, I don't really agree that it should be a banned wrestling move, personally, in the WWE. Interesting to see what happens this WrestleMania if The Rock should lose his title, because The Rock Cena has meant that The Rock Cena feud has gone sort of full circle now, obviously starting last year's WrestleMania and culminating in this year's WrestleMania. So if The Rock does lose his title, what will that mean for the future of The Rock in WWE? Because he has a longer contract, doesn't he, than this?
Yeah, he's committed now to WrestleMania 30.
Well, that's right. So will The Rock be heavily involved up until then, or will he sort of duck out for a bit, back into the movies, or because as we've said before in the last few shows, he isn't going to be doing house shows, so maybe he'll bow out again and maybe pop up again nearer next year's WrestleMania.
Yeah, perhaps we'll see, maybe The Rock involved in SummerSlam and Survivor Series, maybe the bigger pay-per-views of the year. Of course, he was at the Royal Rumble and Elimination Chamber, of course. But I definitely see The Rock losing, because obviously then it's going to be 1-1 going ahead, and then Cena's going to have a WWE title reign again, which he wouldn't have had at that stage for almost 2 years.
Definitely. Interesting, last week we mentioned to you that unfortunately Jack Swagger was involved in a DUI and possession of marijuana, and was obviously arrested and had a very bad mugshot posted all over Facebook and the internet. Interesting, there's no consequences apparently for this matter. Whether this is because WWE has invested time and money into giving him a push, as we believe he'll be taking on Alberto Del Rio for the heavyweight title at WrestleMania, and with the pairing of his new mouthpiece stroke manager Dutch Mantel, whether WWE are actually going to wait till after WrestleMania and maybe do something about it then, or whether he's just been left off with a warning. But a very lucky guy.
Well, I doubt it's very much a case of there are no consequences, because obviously he has to go to court for it. He's also been fined anyway and had to be bailed, I think. So obviously he's out of pocket there, and I'm sure he'll be fined by the WWE if he hasn't already. I'm sure he got quite a stern talking to from the higher ups in the company. But nevertheless, that match of Swagger versus Del Rio, has been built up, and that was the first actual official match confirmed for WrestleMania. So it was already on the card. So it looks like we're still going to get a Swagger push up until WrestleMania. But whether or not he does take the title, that's that's yet to be seen. Whether that was the plan, whether that's changed because of this, well, we don't know at this stage. But it's definitely interesting to see what happens from WrestleMania onwards.
Definitely. I mean, these things on the build-up to main events does sometimes have an effect, such as Lex Luger at WrestleMania 10. I believe Lex Luger was actually supposed to walk out of WrestleMania 10 with the WWF at the time heavyweight title. I believe he got into some trouble the night before, whether he got drunk and some trouble. I can't remember now, such a long time ago. But I remember Vince being very angry with him and basically, taking his opportunity away to have a run with the title. And obviously with the title becomes more money, so that was his punishment. Obviously with Jack Swagger getting into trouble, it does not set a very good example to the up and coming youngsters in the company, and also with the wrestlers in general, because if there is no consequences now, people may think they can get away with it in the future. So not a very good message sent out by Jack Swagger, but he consider himself very lucky to have no consequences.
Also on Raw on Monday, the latest inductee in the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2013 was announced. The celebrity inductee this year is none other than Donald Trump. And the thing about Donald Trump's induction is that actually he has a lot, his history is very strong with WWE. He actually has a notable, memorable history with the company. Unlike, for example, Drew Carey, who's had hardly any involvement with the company over the years. You look at someone like Mike Tyson, who was quite pivotal in WWE. You get someone like here, you think, okay, he pretty much does belong in the WWE in terms of a celebrity wing. But Donald Trump, of course, he's hosted WrestleMania 4 and 5 or 5 and 6.
4 and 5.
4 and 5 at Trump Plaza. He also had the hair versus hair WrestleMania match with Vince McMahon, with Umaga and Bobby Lashley. So he's actually had a big involvement with WWE over the years and a good business relationship with Vince McMahon. So in terms of a celebrity wing and the fact that there is one, I think Donald Trump is certainly a good choice, and probably the best celebrity I can think of to actually be there. That comes to mind.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Vince McMahon has also helped out Donald Trump in the past with appearing on the American version of The Apprentice. He was on there as one of the advisors and experts helping the teams. Actually, on the celebrity edition, if I remember. Yeah, Donald Trump. I have to say that. I mean, a lot of people will say, Donald Trump. But if you like, I totally agree. If you look back in the annals of wrestling history, and also WrestleMania 5 and 6, as Adam said, were both at the Trump Plaza, and they were in good venues. Obviously, very good venues for WWE to come back again exactly next year. So I think Donald Trump is deserving, considering you've actually got Vince McMahon Senior limo driver in the Hall of Fame, and you look at some of the people that are in there who aren't really deserving. Donald Trump is a lot more deserving than many of them. So good luck to him.
Well, the Hall of Fame ceremony, of course, this year takes place on the eve of WrestleMania, as always. At this time, it's from Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena. The WrestleMania card is certainly taking shape, as we discussed. Rock vs. Cena 2 finally confirmed. Jack Swagger versus Alberto Del Rio for the World Heavyweight Championship. And Triple H returned on Raw. Brock Lesnar also made an appearance. And the, of course, rumoured Triple H versus Brock Lesnar SummerSlam rematch seems to be definitely working its way onto the WrestleMania card. So the card is taking the shape place in terms of the main events. Of course, we may be seeing The Undertaker versus CM Punk as well. So 4 pretty big matches there for the WrestleMania card. But there doesn't seem to be much of an undercard at the moment, and there doesn't seem to be any inkling of the direction that the undercard is going to take. There's no real solid feuds at the moment that we think could, go onto the WrestleMania card. They seem to have all been sorted out by themselves recently on like Raw, SmackDown, and the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view. So, stars like Sheamus, The Shield, and Randy Orton, and The Miz, and people like that. No direction for them at the moment, it seems. And you look at Dolph Ziggler and Chris Jericho and Ryback and The Big Show. All these big stars, but seemingly no current direction, which is interesting. 6 weeks from the show. Yeah,
I want to talk about Triple H and Brock Lesnar for a second, because Triple H, he's not old in wrestling terms, but he's obviously well over 40 now, and he is on his way out. Obviously, he's been groomed for the last couple of years as probably the successor to Vince McMahon in running the company. And Brock Lesnar obviously had a fantastic initial run in WWE, left to do UFC, etc., and then came back. But since he's come back, he's not obviously been in the title picture, and they've really had his main feud against Triple H. Now, it just seems a bit of to me personally, a bit of a sort of a filler as such, because they have a match, but it's not really going to lead to anything. It may end this mini feud, but it's not going to end up in a title run or a title victory. For me, it's just, if you understand out there, it's just not really. It's a filler as opposed to a long-term project, something that can be a real money spinner. Whereas people like Dolph Ziggler, your tag teams, all the guys that are Randy Orton, your Big Show, and all the guys that are upper mid card players, to not actually really be on the card yet, this close to WrestleMania, you've got to wonder which direction they're going to take, and wonder who is actually going to get the WrestleMania card. I mean, if you look at his card and you look at the wrestlers that aren't on there, let's take Dolph Ziggler for example. Now, Dolph Ziggler is one hell of an athlete, and he's a tremendous superstar. He's also the holder of the Money in the Bank at the moment. When he gets his shot, we don't know what's in the storyline for him. But let's take this guy. He's done several gimmicks in WWE. He's been in the Spirit Squad. He's worked his way up. He's getting better and better as he goes on. And there's someone who the crowd love to hate, and he can be generally seen as a superstar. And Jack Swagger, who to me is he's a bit, I'd say a little bit dull. His character's a little bit dull, a little bit boring. I don't really ever see him, as I said last time, as a main event player, really, in the long term. And he's just done this, basically slap the hand that feeds you, in Vince McMahon, with his DUI incident. And yet he's given this, tremendous chance at WrestleMania as part of a main event against Alberto Del Rio. So you must think, if you're Dolph Ziggler, you must think, well, I'm working my arse off every week, giving the fans what they want to see. I'm currently holding the Money in the Bank at the moment. Where is the direction? Where is my direction? Do these guys know what to do with me? And that's not just for Dolph Ziggler. There's many talents on the card that are deserving of the spot at the Showcase of the Immortals, but it makes you wonder whether it's politics that are holding some of these guys back. I don't know.
Well, in terms of the main event matches, it seems that WrestleMania so far is a strong card, but you can't have any really weak matches on that card. You can't have any throwaway matches, and especially when there's so many there's so much talent there who aren't on the card at the moment, or at least having been announced. Whether we don't know what's in the works or not, but it's when you have wrestlers such as Brock Lesnar and Triple H and The Undertaker and The Rock on the card. Obviously, they're the big, the money spinners for the show. But at the same time, we rarely ever see them. And the people we do see each and every week on Raw and SmackDown and on Main Event and all of WWE's programming, there's no sign of those guys at the moment for the most part. So hopefully within the next 6 weeks, we are going to get a very solid undercard to go with the solid main event matches.
Yeah, I mean, going back to Swagger versus Del Rio, now we said before that both of us don't agree that Del Rio should be a face, he should be a heel. With his aristocratical ways and his rich guy persona, he's definitely better as a heel. But anyway, he is fighting Swagger for the title, defending his title against Swagger. Now, for me, that is going to be a popcorn match. Now, if you're not quite sure what a popcorn match is, basically it's exactly what it says. It's the match where everyone misses to go out and get a drink and a thing of popcorn for the next match. I think a lot of people are going to not switch off because they're buying a pay-per-view, but the people in the arena, if they want to go to the restroom or buy a drink, that's the match they're going to go out and do it on. Because if it was Del Rio, say, as a heel versus someone like Jericho as a babyface, or CM Punk as a babyface, or Cena, then people, I think, will want to see it. But I think, many people aren't very, I don't think this really appeals to people.
Well, as we said at the beginning of the show, this week's mailbag is an extended edition. Normally we pull 3 questions from the mailbag, the questions that you've been sending in to us, and this week we are going to be doing 6. So let's begin with the very first question this week.
This one is from PJ, no address. He says, WrestleMania 17 is widely regarded as the best WrestleMania of all time. Does WrestleMania still hold the same appeal today as the showcase of the Immortals? Well, first of all, I'd say yes and no. I mean, it depends on whether you're an old school wrestling fan or whether you're a young viewer or a modern viewer. Now, WrestleMania, if you can't get excited about WrestleMania coming around as a wrestling fan, then you might as well switch wrestling off, because WrestleMania is the showcase of the Immortals. It's where the greats of the business should end up at the end of the year. It culminates in many storylines. It's the start of many storylines for the rest of the year. WrestleMania 17, I remember as a very good WrestleMania. I suppose the WrestleManias that stick in your mind are the ones that you can say are the best ones. I mean, WrestleMania 1, WrestleMania 3, Hulk Hogan Andre, WrestleMania 6, Andre Warrior. I suppose if you think about the ones that you can remember the matches of vividly, are the ones you say are the best ones. Things like WrestleMania 2 and 4 and many of those matches weren't quite up to scratch as some of the other WrestleManias. I think it does have the same appeal today. I think it is more of a entertainment spectacle now more than ever. Obviously nowadays it has the Hall of Fame obviously every night before WrestleMania, which adds to the appeal and spectacle of it. So I think WrestleMania does hold its appeal. I think in many ways they could be better. I think last year, such as Daniel Bryan versus Sheamus, in a match that lasted a few seconds, to have a title match at WrestleMania last few seconds, I thought was a bit of a rip. I thought it was done very badly. But yes, I still think it is the show to watch.
Yes, I would agree that WrestleMania does still have the appeal as it always has. I mean, the kind of soul of WrestleMania was that it was a combination of wrestling and also entertainment spectacle, and it's sort of a convergence of sort of Hollywood and wrestling. I mean, WrestleMania 1 ushered in the rock and wrestling era, which really gave WWE the popularity that made it surge and basically dominate all the competition and do away with the territories. So WrestleMania has always been about that kind of connection, and we're always going to see these celebrities somehow get involved in the show. WrestleMania, the recent WrestleManias have been doing in the last 5 years or so, have been doing the biggest buy rates in WrestleMania history. So more people than ever are watching WrestleMania, more people than ever are buying WrestleMania on pay-per-view. So I think it does have the same international appeal as it always has. The key to a good WrestleMania is, of course, having these big blockbuster matches on the on the run up to the show, but of course they have to deliver, and all the matches need to be solid, really. And I think like you said, PJ, that WrestleMania 17 is widely considered to be the best. It was because so many of the matches were solid, and there were no extremely weak matches on the show, or no kind of cop outs like we saw last year, like you mentioned with Daniel Bryan and Sheamus, which I know many people were looking forward to. As one of the highlights of the show, and I think it was Extreme Rules when they finally did get that match, and it proved to be an excellent match, which was a bit of a kick in the teeth, when you were kind of screwed out of it when WrestleMania 28 came along. But I do think it still has the same appeal as it always has. It's all about the build and the execution. I think sometimes the celebrity involvement they could do away with to some extent. I mean, last year we had Maria Menounos from I don't know the show, as I believe it airs over here in the UK, but she was a very an extremely minor celebrity, and she was wrestling a Divas tag team match last year. So I would do away with people like that, because I think they actually have a negative effect on WrestleMania. But then again, last year WWE was reportedly in talks to have Justin Bieber sing the national anthem or something of that ilk at the beginning of the show. Now, as much of a Justin Bieber fan I am not, nor probably most of the WWE universe are, that is the kind of celebrity that you want to have involved in the show, because that actually adds something to the show in terms of the spectacle and the whole, like I said, kind of rock and wrestling connection, that kind of Hollywood connection that WrestleMania has always had since the very first edition. So I think, with the celebrity involvement, it's a very... it can either add or drastically take away from the show.
Personally, I don't think that Justin Bieber, a Canadian, singing the American national anthem at WrestleMania would be a very good move, personally, because he's, the teeny bopper girls love him, but wrestling audience, I don't think he'd be as appreciated. But certainly with the celebrities of national anthem, it makes it all a bigger spectacle. Okay, next question. This has no name, but thank you anyway. It says, since you guys are based in the UK, do you think that the recent TNA UK tour was a success? Well, actually, we had the opportunity to go and see one of the TNA UK events at Wembley, but we decided to give it a miss. However, I think that the attendance figures show that it was quite a good success. I mean, Wembley Arena actually had over 10,000 people for one of the events, so that's one of their, if not their biggest, certainly one of their biggest attendances they've ever had. For me, a problem was that the fact that Jeff Hardy wasn't able to travel because he wouldn't be granted a visa from his past misdemeanors, let's say. Now, to not have your world champion fly internationally for an international audience was a bit of a kick in the teeth for the fans. Whether he was billed or not before, I don't know. But I certainly think it's not done TNA any harm coming to the UK, because obviously they do have a fan base over here. But I think maybe they should just try and concentrate on getting their American audiences up, because that is their bread and butter.
Well, TNA broadcasts over here in the UK on Challenge TV, a network in the UK, and the ratings of Impact Wrestling has actually been quite considerable, and they do have a massive UK fan base. The ratings over here for TNA's programming is, it's not that far behind WWE's actually, which some internationally may find surprising. So TNA does have a big UK audience. The tour was very successful in terms of attendance. I mean, I think actually that this year at Wembley Arena about 8,000, 9,000 attended, and I think it was 12,000 last year. So that it was down, but then last year's Wembley Arena attendance actually set an all-time attendance record for a TNA event, and that was just for Impact Wrestling. It wasn't for a pay-per-view or anything. So that was just a TV taping. So the tour was a success. It may not have been as much of a success as last year, but it was still successful nonetheless. And this is definitely a key market for TNA, because their TV is so successful over here. And also, you look at a channel like Challenge TV. British wrestling is returning to national television on that network. We also have a talk show over here called Wrestle Talk TV, which is literally just a talk show about professional wrestling all over the world, hosted over here in the UK. So wrestling seems to be rising in popularity actually over here in the UK at the moment. So definitely, I think it was a good idea for TNA to do the tour and definitely continue to tap into this market. In terms of Jeff Hardy being the World Heavyweight Champion, of course, being a World Heavyweight Champion, when you're an international company like TNA, you do need a champion who represents the company internationally. I mean, you can't have a champion who can leave the USA to work. It's a major blow to the company, and you have to think, well, okay, so TNA only travels abroad, a few times a year, or maybe even once a year for the UK tour. You have to think, well, it may just be that time, but like I said, your champion represents your company. Your company has an international presence. You should probably start looking at having someone who can work the shows internationally. I mean, 4 weeks of television were taped over here in the UK. Jeff Hardy not on a single episode, obviously. So that's a major thing, especially when you're building towards a pay-per-view like Lockdown, and especially when that's your next pay-per-view after a few months off, because obviously TNA's changed its pay-per-view schedule, and Genesis in early February, I think, perhaps, or late January was the last pay-per-view before Lockdown, and that's not until late March. So I think it was definitely, things like that should be looked at closely.
I want to say something about TNA wrestling, because we often give TNA wrestling a bad, a bad throw of the dice, as it were, and bad reviews. But I've been thinking about this over the last couple of weeks, and I want to know if anyone out there has the answer. TNA, over the last few years, has had some real good talent in many ways. It has had a lot of people at the back who have had real big influences in the WWE over the years, such as Al Snow. You've got Bruce Pritchard, they've had Dutch Mantell, they've had Vince Russo, they've had Ric Flair, they've got Hogan, they've got Eric Bischoff behind the scenes. Now, I just thought about it. I thought they've all this talent over the last few years that have been there at certain times. They've got a TV show, 2-hour TV show in Impact. Why are they struggling as much as they have to get to compete with WWE? Now, I know WWE is obviously, it is going to beat TNA at the moment, because it's, it's such a huge company, it's such a popular company. TNA has a lot of work to do to, begin just getting itself in order. But it makes you wonder whether it's something to do with Dixie Carter, whether she's just in way over her head running a wrestling company. Because if you've got people like Hulk Hogan there and Eric Bischoff, was the, director of WCW, Hulk Hogan, the most successful, most famous wrestler of all time. You've got Bruce Pritchard, who was instrumental in making WWE a success. You had Vince Russo, who, love him or hate him, definitely contributed to the success of WWF in the late 90s. And you take all the positives that TNA have got in them, and you put them together, you think, well, actually, they have got some, they should be doing better than what they're actually doing with what they've got. So I'd like to know what you think that they should be doing, and if you maybe can, post it to us on Facebook, or email us, which will be the address later in the show. But I thought they've got, got Kurt Angle there, they've had the Christians there, they've got Rob Van Dam, they've got the knowledge of Mike Tenay, who's, perhaps they should look at, ask him more what he should be doing. They've had Kevin Nash. They've had some huge stars, and I think they should have really. And they've got, they've got Sting there. Sting, a huge superstar. Why are they struggling so much? Interesting to find out what you think. Okay, next question. This is from Alex Dean. He says, what do you guys think of the decision to remove wrestling from the Olympic Games? Well, it's a very touchy subject with many, many people, because you've got to remember that when the Olympics, they come from Greece, originated in Greece, that, one of the forerunners of the Olympics was, of course, different types of wrestling. You had Greco-Roman, amateur wrestling. There's many different types and forms of wrestling. And another thing that people obviously don't, forget, that this is going to have an effect on the future of professional wrestling as well. Because you look at how many stars there are in today's and the past. that have actually got amateur wrestling backgrounds. People like Kurt Hennig, Brock Lesnar, Bret Hart, just to name a few. And they started off on the amateur circuit and worked their way up. And you look at Kurt Angle, he was a Olympic gold medalist, and then he became one of the greatest ever stars to lace a pair of professional wrestling boots up. So to take away the grassroots, because people, if it's not Olympic sport, people aren't going to worry about it. People aren't going to be training to get to the Olympic level. So people might want to go professional early to make the money. So I mean, it's a very bad decision. I mean, what do they want to replace it? Table tennis?
I think that's already in there.
Oh, totally already in there. I mean, there are some sports that really should not be in there, and to take the wrestling out of the Olympic Games is, for me, it's ludicrous, and it will definitely have an effect on the production of professional wrestlers in the future.
Like you said, wrestling is one of the cornerstones of the Olympic Games. It's one of you look at wrestling, and that is something that originated in in those times when the Olympic Games were first formed. It's an original Olympic sport. Why it's being removed is completely beyond me. And you do have these silly sports in there like table tennis. So I don't know how that can stay and wrestling can go, because I much know what I'd rather see. Again, like you said, Kurt Angle, an Olympic gold medalist, headhunted to move into professional wrestling. The amount of amateur wrestlers who were headhunted to transition to professional wrestling. Brock Lesnar, Jack Swagger, a current example. Dolph Ziggler, all these, talented professional wrestlers who started off with very successful amateur wrestling careers. What's going to happen to these guys? Are we going to see, general wrestling attendance for people who want to pursue that sport? Are we going to see that decline because it's no longer an Olympic sport? As of I believe it's in the next Olympics, but after that it's completely gone. So it's definitely going to have an adverse effect, and I really do not understand the decision.
No, I mean, in a world today where everyone wants to be a professional wrestler and to become a star and make loads of money and do what they, the thing they love to do, what they love to watch is wrestling, and I want to be a wrestler. But what is going to make you stand out from the next guy? I mean, if you've got a sound amateur background, that is going to put you in good stead to be a professional, because you remember where you came from. You've taken the bumps on the mat, because amateur wrestling is hard. There's a lot of mat sports are, such as judo. It can be a very brutal sport. So that will put you in good stead. But what makes you so special if you're just you go to a gym and you think, I want to become a wrestler. I'm going to go to a training school and I'm going to give them my $3,000 and learn to wrestle. Well, it's not that simple. So by having an amateur background, that has been a big bonus to many current and past superstars in the world of wrestling. This next question is from Jason Price of Guernsey, and he says, is there anything from the past era in wrestling that you'd like to see in the current WWE product? Well, I'm sure, Jason, it's not just WWE, it's probably also the TNA product. There's certain things. I mean, I'm a very much of an old school wrestling fan, and more of a Attitude Era onwards wrestling fan. I liked it personally when there was more backstage interviews, more promos, more managers for a start, and when it was a bit less scripted as such, when they had more of a role, the wrestlers, to say what they wanted to say on the microphone. When wrestlers came into the WWE at the time, you wouldn't just get the wrestler thrown in one week with a video package already presented for him on his Titantron. They would bring wrestlers in on the video packages with vignettes, sort of up to 2 months in advance. I remember the vignettes they did for Scott Hall, built him up as this walking through the streets of Miami as this big bad tough guy. And when you brought a wrestler in, you already knew what he was, about really, and it gave you something to look forward to. Wrestlers, they bring back the managers, bring back from the 80s, your Bobby Heenans, your Jimmy Harts, Mr. Fuji's. So yeah, there's a few things I like to bring back. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, managers is definitely a big one. I mean, recently we've seen people like Ricardo Rodriguez, who of course is Alberto Del Rio's personal ring announcer, and I think that adds something to his character. He's quite a unique person to have ringside. I mean, he isn't just a manager. Also now with Jack Swagger, Dutch Mantel as Zeb Coulter is in his corner and is his mouthpiece, and he's he's talking for Jack Swagger. Jack Swagger's literally at the moment only saying "We the people," because he's not good on the microphone, and that's something that's needed because you write all these scripts for people, but they can't actually talk. In that case, you need someone who can talk for them, and that's where managers come in handy. So I think there should definitely be more managers, especially there's certainly more people than just Jack Swagger who aren't too great on the microphone in WWE, who could certainly benefit from having a mouthpiece or a manager.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to see just pop up sporadically is a few more sort of tournaments and battle royals. I mean, I can remember watching superstars in the late 80s, early 90s, and you might have a intercontinental title, a vacant title battle royal, such as when Kurt Hennig won it. The IC tournament against Tito Santana at the end. Just a few more variations, really, rather than having just a straightforward match for a title. Actually have a few maybe tournaments in there, not pay-per-view style, but just to give it a bit of more variety. Also, personally, I'm a very old school fan. I wish they'd bring back, and this is nothing to do with the in-ring product, but I'd like to bring back red, white and blue ropes, blue ring steps, and also I'd like to bring back the old referee shirt and bow ties, like Hebner used to wear. I don't know, I just preferred it when it was like that. Obviously, that has no effect on the in-ring product, but also, one thing I think that the WWE products needs today with the wrestlers, and also any wrestler really, whether it's independent, TNA, WWE, Japan, anywhere, is the art of psychology. Now, they teach these wrestlers in these wrestling schools. You pay $3,000. They teach you how to bump, blah blah blah. You leave there thinking you're a wrestler now. But one thing they don't teach you is the art of psychology. Now, I know it's something you need to practice on in the mirror, and you need to work on it. And some people have got it, and some people haven't. Some people like Jake Roberts had it in abundance. But let's get these. If you have the psychology part of it, it can make the match a lot easier, and it might get the crowds back into it. Because if you get a wrestler that's got you in the seat of his palm with what he's saying or talking or doing, regardless of the match, I think it's going to improve the product.
Yeah, it's like when you mentioned tournaments there, and a bit of variety to make the shows a bit different. I mean, one of the reasons I really enjoy WWE Main Event, which airs on Wednesdays in the US, is that it kind of feels different, and it feels big in a way, because you usually have this main event caliber match, and this pretty much a pay-per-view caliber match, a long match, 15 to 20 minutes, and we haven't really seen that in the last few weeks actually, which is why I think the show's quite dramatically gone downhill. But that's been the impetus of Main Event since it started, and that's what made it, I think, a bit different to Raw and SmackDown. Of course, it's only an hour-long show, but it seemed, there seemed to be quite, it seemed to be a major show, even though it was just 60 minutes long, and isn't a flagship show or anything. But talking about tournaments and things, I mean, the Intercontinental Cup was supposed to take place on Main Event, just to make the show even more different than Raw and SmackDown. Supposed to be a recurring theme of that show was the Intercontinental Championship Cup, and it was supposed to go on for 2, 3, 4 weeks or however long, where the winner would get a shot at Wade Barrett's Intercontinental title, and it was announced and it was hyped up, and then all of a sudden it was cancelled, and the only other mention of it being cancelled was on Wade Barrett's Twitter account, and it was never mentioned on TV again. And I think that's a big shame, because it brought intrigue to Main Event even more so, and I think you need more of these kind of, as far as tournaments go, these themed shows. And I don't mean that in terms of pay-per-views where we have like TLC and Hell in a Cell, because obviously I've been quite vocal in the past about my disdain for things like that. But when it comes to tournaments and maybe King of the Ring, I think those shows would be better off coming back.
I mean, one thing that wasn't in the wrestling past in the 80s, 90s, and sort of early 2000s is the fact that Vince McMahon was very proud that he gave to the audience what he advertised. Such as when he had a run-in with the Ultimate Warrior because Ultimate Warrior let him down at some live events and he had to let him go. When Warrior held him up at SummerSlam 91 and the match made in Hell when he teamed up with Hulk Hogan to face the team of Sergeant Slaughter, the Iron Sheik and General Adnan. And he stood Vince up, I think, for $200,000, and Vince McMahon had to pay it because he wanted to deliver what he billed as the main event for the audience, as the Warrior was going to no-show. So Vince McMahon those days, I think, wouldn't have changed it. He would have, kept it. He would have billed it and kept it as it was. But nowadays, the WWE seems to chop and change every 2 minutes. They're going to do something, then they're going to pull a match from the card, or rearrange a match at the last minute, or add things to the card at the last minute. So that's probably one thing that's I think has changed a bit. Also, one thing they used to do in the past era of wrestling is when they wanted to get a guy over, especially a new guy coming in, they would always put them off against jobbers. People like Barry Howitz and Dwayne Gill, and they had one guy called Kayfabe, which was quite funny at the time. And they basically, a new wrestler would come in, they go to the ring, they'd absolutely destroy the jobber over a few weeks, different jobbers, and then eventually they'd get some more stiff competition and build them up again against some of the mid-card guys. But I mean, the other day they had Jack Swagger to come back in, and they wanted him to make him this new sort of almost psychotic, monster, relentless machine, wrestling machine, who's got this new attitude. And yet we said last week that he fought Kofi Kingston in the match, and really he didn't get over at all in the way that WWE probably planned. I mean, he didn't look anything special in the match, but I think back in the early 90s and late 80s, like on Superstars, they would have had him out there against some jobber and just destroying them, and week after week, and building them up. And I think that sort of psychology of how they present the product in that respect, it has changed, and I like to see that come back really. But obviously, I think the day of the jobber in that sense has gone. Okay, next question. This is no name to this one, but it's a very good question. They say, if you could interview Vince McMahon on your show, what would you ask him? Well, there's probably a million questions we'd love to answer Vince McMahon, but we'll stick to one each. If I could ask Vince McMahon any question, it would probably be which talent got away from him from another company, such as, I mean, one of the talents that has never worked with Vince McMahon, and we always wondered what would happen if he did, is Sting. Now, I say to him, someone like Sting, why has he never wrestled for you? Was it money? Was it politics? Was he difficult to deal with? Did you ever try and go after Magnum TA? Did you ever try and get Ric Flair in the 80s? Who would you have loved to have got in that didn't come, or who would you love to get in that came later, or something along those lines? I think that'd be a very interesting answer. What about you, Adam?
Well, the question that I would ask is actually quite a basic question, but it's something that you never hear Vince talk about in the the very few interviews he does, and that is quite simply, what is his all-time favourite match, or maybe expanding upon that. What's his top 3 or top 5 favourite matches of all time? I think it'll be very, very interesting to see why he thinks that, and his own personal opinion of what made his favourite match so great. I think that would be fascinating.
Exactly. I mean, the list, like we said, can go on and on. I mean, people would love to know the story of why he fell out with Savage. What happened with Nails? What really happened with the Montreal Screwjob? There's so many things you could ask him. I mean, it'll be a 20-hour interview. It will take 2 days to do. But that's our thoughts anyway. Okay, our last question this week is from Mark Fry, and he says, if you could pick a WrestleMania dream match, what would it be? I presume it means who will it be against, really, Mark? This is such a difficult question to answer because there really is so many, and yet I can actually think of so few. I mean, I'd love to see 2 technical wrestlers go together. I'd like to see Kurt Angle versus Mr. Perfect, and 2 technical wrestlers there. I mean, I'd love to see maybe Hulk Hogan against Bruno Sammartino. I mean, there's so many ifs and buts, and so many maybes. I mean, Bret Hart versus John Cena. I mean, what about you, Adam? This is such a difficult question because...
Well, we've seen The Rock versus Hulk Hogan, and now we've seen The Rock versus John Cena, and we're going to see it twice, in fact, now. So I would like to see Hulk Hogan versus John Cena. I think that's the next... I think that's probably the biggest possible dream match that there could be now that hasn't taken place. I think that would be the biggest money match. It's such a difficult question. I mean, there's so many choices, but it's so really difficult to nail it down. But one dream match that seems to be the dream match of many, many people, actually, is The Undertaker versus Sting. And I've heard that for so many years now, that people want that to happen so badly. And I have never once understood the appeal of Sting versus The Undertaker. Their wrestling styles are completely different. There's nothing similar to them at all, apart from wearing long coats to the ring. I have never ever seen the appeal of Sting versus The Undertaker, and yet many, many people want it to happen and think it is a dream match and a WrestleMania dream match. I mean, if you're one of those people, feel free to drop us an email and please explain why. But that has just never appealed to me.
No, I totally agree. Well, thank you again for your questions. If you want to send us more questions, you can send them to us at the Facebook site. Just type in Hot Tag Podcast on Facebook and you'll find us. Please like us and send your questions there. You can either just post them there or private message us. You can also email them at
hottagmailbag@yahoo.com, and we'll be checking through those in the next couple of weeks and selecting another trio for the next show. Now, before we get on to the competition this week, and of course the competition from last Sunday, which was for a copy of the Attitude Era on DVD. A couple of weeks ago we gave away Wrestling with Shadows, the 10th anniversary collector's edition, which had a bonus disc of the documentary The Life and Death of Owen Hart. And it's been a long time since I saw this documentary, actually, but you watched this documentary a few days ago, didn't you, the 10th anniversary collector's edition?
Yeah, I mean, I've also seen this originally when it came out, but I wanted to watch the remastered version as well because it was such a good DVD at the time. I wanted to enjoy it again. I mean, Bret Hart is such an interesting wrestler, to watch in the ring normally, let alone a documentary of behind the scenes. It was really interesting to see more about his family and his family life growing up and how hard it was for him in the early days working for his father and trying to keep his father happy. Because obviously, I mean, there's another guy who had an amateur background, and he wanted to impress his father. So that relates to the question we had earlier about the Olympics. I mean, here's a guy whose work ethic is second to none, and this is a guy who, no one has worked harder than Bret the Hitman Hart. He was a real fighting champion, and one of the best WWE champions probably of all time. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He's only a 6-footer, 230 something pounds, but he took on all comers. And it's the age-old question because the DVD, we don't spoil too much for you, but it does culminate with the Montreal Screwjob of '97, and you'll find out a lot more about that. I mean, if you've never really, known the facts about it and the behind-the-scenes stuff, I really would recommend just getting this DVD for that. It doesn't go into, because it was I think it was a 1998 release originally. It doesn't go, obviously, it was before Owen's tragic death, before Bret Hart's stroke, his WCW run. So if you're expecting to see info about that, then it won't be on there. But from up to that point and his wrestling career with WWE and Stampede Wrestling, it's a fantastic watch, and I'd recommend it. If I had to give it a rating out of 10, I'd give it at least an 8.
But of course there is the Life and Death of Owen Hart bonus disc on there as well, so you can have a bit of insight into the Hart family following the Montreal Screwjob. From what I remember it, it's an interesting time capsule, of course, because of the Montreal Screwjob, and looking back at the effect it had on Hart immediately following that event, and in fact on the night of the event, before and after, what happened in the ring in that match against Shawn Michaels. But also, it's there's a lot of backstage footage from WWE events, and I think that's always interesting because it's something that you're probably never going to see again in such a capacity. I mean, after Beyond the Mat and Wrestling with Shadows, there was a big clampdown on such things as footage backstage and stuff. But I always thought that was very, very interesting. Just a bit of a backstage pass to what goes on behind the scenes at WWE.
Exactly, and if you, one thing that I've also want to plug for Bret as well is, I believe it was 2008 I actually got it, was Bret Hart's latest book called Bret Hart's My Life in the Cartoon World of Wrestling, and that was really interesting. This obviously follows on from the DVD and starts off from Bret's childhood up until the present day, and that includes all his personal life after Montreal. So if you want to, I would recommend getting this DVD most definitely, or renting it. But if you want to continue finding out about Bret Hart, then Bret Hart's book My Life in the Cartoon World of Wrestling is a must read for any Bret Hart fan. So if you can get your hands on them, then do so.
Well, the Owen Hart disc packaged with the Bret Hart Collector's Edition, the 10th Anniversary Collector's Edition, is now available from Clear Vision over here in the UK, but is available for purchase worldwide as well. On to this week's competition, or at first, of course, the competition from last week. We gave away a copy of the Attitude Era on DVD. The question for that was...
In which year did Stone Cold Steve Austin debut the Smoking Skull Championship belt? It was, in which year did Stone Cold Steve Austin debut the Smoking Skull Championship belt? We gave you this question because it related to the new WWE title belt that The Rock displayed on last week's Raw, and the possible answers were A, 1998, B, 1997, or C, 1999. And of course the answer was
1998. It was A, and the winner of that is in the States, is from Baltimore, and it is Glenn Peterson. So congratulations to Glenn. We'll be getting the Attitude Era on DVD over to you very, very shortly. This week, another WWE DVD for you. It is TLC 2012, the TLC pay-per-view from the end of last year. Available on DVD now. It's the new release from Fremantle Media here in Europe. And the question for this prize is...
The question is, who was The Undertaker's very first manager in WWE/WWF? Who was The Undertaker's very first manager in WWE/WWF? Was it A, Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, B, Paul Bearer, or C, Brother Love? Now think about this one, because you might think you know it, but think again, because it's quite a trick question, this one, especially if you're a newer wrestling fan. So have a think about this one, and you can private message your answers to Facebook on the Hot Tag Podcast. Please do not post them on the front page. Please private message them with your answer and your address and postage details. You can also send your answer to us at our email address, which is
hottagmailbag@yahoo.com. And also any questions you have for next week's mailbag, please send them to those addresses as well, and also the Facebook page. Just search for the Hot Tag Podcast.
And good luck with that.
And that about does it for this week's edition of the Hot Tag here on GoIt.net. We hope you've enjoyed listening. We hope you've enjoyed the extended mailbag. Good luck to those of you entering the competition. Congratulations again to Glenn from Baltimore for winning last week's competition. And our next show, we'll reveal the winner of this week's competition, will be in 2 weeks from today, Sunday, March 17th.
Thanks for listening. Goodbye. We'll see you then.